Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to do a very interesting topic of connecting to your Azure virtual machine through something called as Bastion Host. If you remember in the last two videos where we have created a Windows-based virtual machine and a Linux-based virtual machine, we connected to them using RDP and SSH protocols respectively. So then why is there a specific need of studying Bastion Host? Let's understand. So if you remember the wizard for creating the virtual machines, there was one important step called as networking. And in the networking options, you had to specify public IP as well as what are the inbound ports that you want to open up. For being able to connect through an RDP or an SSH protocol over the internet, you need to have a VM with a public IP, which means that that particular virtual machine is exposed on public internet on not on all the ports, but on the specific ports that you have opened up, right? Now, this particular option of exposing your virtual machine or your network on public internet through RDP or SSH ports could render your entire network to threats. What kind of threats? One important could be remote management threats, because attackers often attempt to gain access by compromising account credentials either through brute force attacks, which means password brute forcing, phishing, and even port scanning. You must be wondering, how does the attackers get hold of the public IP addresses? So Azure publishes the range of IP addresses in its public cloud weekly, at least once every week. So the subscribers are expected to perform necessary changes to the sites in order to correctly identify the services running in Azure. So once the attacker has hold of the public IP address, he could run multiple combinations of the passwords or frequently used passwords, which is nothing but password brute forcing. They could even scan the ports. And once the attacker is within the system or the virtual machine, then he has unlimited control of it. While I'm making this video, I'm just reading that MNCs like Cognizant also is currently struggling with Maze attack, which is one of the ransomware viruses. It is very difficult unless you're following some solutions, like you could change the RDP and SSH ports. Instead of using the standard 3389 and 22, you can update the registry to make the changes to the port numbers. Just-in-time access. In Azure, you can actually enable just-in-time access instead of anywhere, anytime access to reduce the amount of exposure to the internet. Account lockout policy. Like if there are X number of unsuccessful attempts, then the account is locked out. Restricted access only for particular period of time, only by the particular users. Strong username and password. Of course, this is a very important mandate, that do not use any frequently or commonly used words as your passwords. So the one important suggestion here is a jump server. The jump server is considered as the only entry point to your virtual machines, which means that you do not directly RDP or SSH to the virtual machine from your laptops or from the public internet, but you first log into your jump server, and from the jump server you have to connect or RDP or SSH into your virtual machine. That means that your virtual machine itself has no need to have a public IP or a PIP. It can have a private IP, and the jump server, which either can be on-premise or on the cloud, to be able to connect to these virtual machines using the private IP. If it is present on-premise, then you have to have mechanisms like site-to-site VPN or express route to establish the connection between on-prem and cloud, which is more secure. And the jump server in itself is a hardened server, which means that it has extensive monitoring tools, anti-malware tools, alerting tools, and if there is any malware or if there is any suspicious activity going on, then it can very quickly identify or alert. However, some of the problems still associated with the concept of jump server is that there are a lot of administrative challenges in order to update, troubleshoot the jump box itself, and additional cost, of course, because the jump servers are also additional servers. Hence the concept of Azure Bastion. You can consider Azure Bastion Host as a managed jump server or jump server as a service. So it is a managed PaaS service that provides seamless RDP and SSH connectivity to your virtual machines over the SSL protocol or the port number 443. There is no need for exposing VMs to internet through public IP. The Azure Bastion host directly sits in your Azure virtual network, and it provides a jump server as a service and integrated connectivity to all the virtual machines in the virtual network. It basically uses RDP and SSH directly from and through the browser, which supports HTML5 and Azure Portal experience. So all the modern browsers with HTML5 support can be used as an Azure Bastion host. The architecture of this is there is a portal and the user is connecting to the portal over 443, and the Azure portal also is requesting a Bastion host over the 443 protocol, and the NSG is sitting here, which allows the 443 port number. The Azure Bastion itself connects to the Azure VMs over the private IP. Either it could be 3389 or 22. So in this demo, what we're going to do is create Windows and Linux-based virtual machines without public IPs, then create an Azure Bastion host in the same virtual network as the VMs, and after that connect to the VMs using the Azure Bastion host. So let's start. So here I am on portal.azure.com. I'm going to go to the virtual machines section and I'm going to add one Windows-based virtual machine. So let's put all our resources in Bastion demo resource group. The name of the demo, the name of the virtual machine, let's keep it test window 1. I would like to keep it in the East US region. Create a Windows 2012 R2 data center. I'll select the B1 size, the most cheapest size. Azure admin. So I'm only allowing the 443 port. I'm going to keep the disk's default settings. For the virtual network, I'm going to create a new virtual network. Let's see, the address space that I'm going to give is 172.16.0.0/16. So here I have 65,000 addresses. So I'm going to create a default address range. Let's say by 24. So I get 256 addresses in the first subnet. And this is one important thing, that you have to create a subnet with the name Azure Bastion, and it specifically needs to have /27 address range. That means it has to have 32 addresses. So keep this in mind, that the name of the subnet has to be Azure Bastion subnet, and the address range should be a /27 address range. Okay, so this is the default. I'm going to say none, no public IP. Okay, so the rest of the settings I'm going to leave it by default, and once the final validation is passed, I'm going to click on create. So let's give it a few minutes to create. While the virtual machine is getting created, let's add another virtual machine. This time let's create a Linux based virtual machine in the same resource group. I'm going to name it test Linux 1. Ubuntu server image.
Going to change it to the basic size. Azure admin. So I'm going to again use an SSH public key. In the last video, we had used a PuttyGen app to create the private and public keys. This time, let's go ahead and open the Azure command prompt and basically use the command ssh-keygen -t rsa -b 4096 and -c my email address. So this is going to help us generating the public-private RSA key pair. Kindly note that for the Azure Bastion host to connect to a Linux VM over SSH using an SSH key, you have to ensure that you're using an RSA algorithm. Otherwise, it does not support.
So I'm going to save it in a temp directory. Entering a passphrase. Okay. So now here I'm going to just open a notepad and going to copy the public key and going to paste it here and give a username Azure admin. And if you remember, we have pre-decided only to allow 443 port, leaving the disks options default. In the networking section, I'm going to ensure that I'm going to select the same virtual network where I have created the Windows virtual machine and the same default subnet where I have also placed the Windows virtual machine. Don't want any public IP. Okay, so going to review and create. Once the final validation is passed, I'm going to create because things look very much okay. Okay, so while this is also creating, I'm going to show you how do we create a Bastion host. So in the services, look out for bastions. I'm going to create a new bastion. I'm going to put it in the same resource group, though it is not mandatory that you should keep it in the same resource group. I'm going to give it a name, Bastion Host Demo. Let's keep it in the same region. If you see here, there could be a select regions where the Bastion hosts are available. It's mandatory that you select the same virtual network for which you're creating the virtual network. If you see here, automatically the subnet got selected with the name Azure Bastion subnet. I'm going to create a public IP address. Please remember that for a Bastion host, you have to mandatorily create a public IP, and the SKU is going to be a standard SKU because that's the only one supported. And if you see here, a static assignment is by default selected. So a standard static public IP is what a Bastion host requires. So I'm going to review and create. So this will take a few minutes for it to be created. Alright, so the Windows virtual machine is created, and we are currently also creating a Linux virtual machine as well as a Bastion host.
So alright, so after 6 minutes precisely, the Bastion host is now created. Let's go to the resource group and see what are the different resources that we have in this resource group. We have a Bastion. We have disks, which are the operating system disks for Linux and Windows. We have network interface cards for Linux and Windows virtual machines. We have network security groups. We have only one public IP address. This is for the Bastion. A storage account for, logging the operating system diagnostics. We have two virtual machines and one virtual network. To understand what are the different things in the virtual network, I'll show you a quick thing. So you go to the virtual network, we are in the Bastion demo RG virtual network, and look out for diagram. So this is going to draw us a diagram of what are the different available things in the virtual network. We have a default subnet and a Bastion subnet. And in the default subnet, we have a Linux virtual machine and a Windows virtual machine. Go to the resource group again, Bastion demo resource group. I'm only going to open virtual machine. So let's go to the test Windows 1 virtual machine. I'm going to say connect using RDP. Do you think it is going to help us connect? It is going to fail because this one does not have a public IP address. To confirm, go to the overview section, and if you see here, the public IP address is not available. This is going to fail. It says that it cannot find the remote computer, and hence our virtual machine is no more exposed on the public internet. So now I'm going to connect it with the Bastion. If you see here, it has automatically recognized the Bastion host because the Bastion host is placed in the same subnet within the virtual network in which this VM is residing. So I'm going to give the username and password here. I'm going to click on connect. Alright, a pop-up blocker is blocking, so I'm going to always allow pop-ups from portal.azure.com. So if you see here, it has opened in a new window because the option here was selected, and it says, do you want the text and images to be copied to the clipboard? Say yes. So this Windows virtual machine is now open in a browser session. Similarly, let's try to open up the Linux virtual machine. So I'm going back to the virtual machines, and test Linux 1 is my Linux virtual machine. If you see in the overview tab, it does not have any public IP address. It only has a private IP address. So if you are connecting over SSH, that means that you will have to use a terminal on the virtual machine which can understand the Linux virtual machine's private IP address, which is not the case. So go to the Bastion prompt, and here again I'm trying to give Azure admin is my username and SSH private key. So open with the notepad maybe. Control C, Control V. Typing in the passphrase, connect. So it's going to open in another browser session, and I can see that the prompt is running. You can run some putty commands. So this way we can open the Linux or the Windows virtual machine in a browser session without having a need to have public IPs and neither the need to open the ports RDP and SSH. Before we end today's session, let's do a very quick recap. This would be the template for creating the new Bastion host resource. You have to provide the details of your subscription, the resource group where the Bastion resource should be created, the name of the Bastion resource, the region in which it will be created. Need to create a virtual network, either create a new one or use the same virtual network on which you have the virtual machines which need to be connected over the Bastion host. Subnet name must and need should be Azure Bastion subnet, and it needs to be having an address space of /27 or higher. Public IP address, you can create a new one or use the existing one. This is the same public address on which the RDP or SSH will be accessed over port 443. Please note that the only SKU allowed is a standard SKU and the assignment is a static public IP. So these settings are pre-populated. So that's it for today. Stay tuned for the next sessions. Thank you so much.